Place.
Peyton Place.
A lot of questions, but why don't you tell me about how did it start? How did you, I know it was a novel, but how did you come to create it for television?
Bill Self called me in, and he asked me whether I thought we could do a series about Peyton Place. I said, certainly. That's how it happened. And I'd never dealt with any kind of soap opera or anything of that sort. Didn't know the rules. And we did a script, cast it, we shot it, showed it. Everyone liked it. And I was dissatisfied with it because there was a character missing, and that character was Ed Nelson, who became a doctor and allowed us to take Warner Anderson, name came out, and make a something of him. Oh, the newspaper thing. So it was the only time I've heard of that it's someone has, maybe it's happened anyway, has taken a script, has taken a show, made the show, sold the show, and then decided to do it over.
What was it, this plane's going by, but I'll ask the question. When Bill Self called, or when you talked to him, what was the original concept? I mean, did you have it? Had you thought out?
I hadn't thought about it at all. I'd never read the book. I had seen the film, and I think our thinking, or my thinking, was more based on the film than on the book, and. Once we had written the script, the trick was getting it cast. And getting it cast meant getting the right Allison McKenzie. And that happened to be Mia Farrow. And I went to New York. And I remember sitting on the stone steps of one of the buildings around 10th Street and so on, and talking with her, and finally persuading her to do the show. And she's never thanked me for that, though.
What did you tell her? What did you tell her about the show that convinced her to do it? This is a new concept. Or did you see it that way at the time?
It was new. I may have told her, I don't remember what I told her. It's hard to tell in this interview, but I was being charming. And anyway, she came on board, and the other roles were much easier to cast. So,
in terms of the type of television that was on at the time, like 1964, it
was 1963, was it, or 4? When did it start? Maybe it was 64 to 69. I don't remember.
I don't remember the first air date, but at that time, I think there had been a certain establishment of television, of patterns of shows. There were already comedies, there were already hour dramas, there were some variety shows, but this had not been done.
No, it had not.
What was different? What was different about this show conceptually?
Conceptually, well, it was conceived as a soap opera, a nighttime soap opera. And we were under the obligation of doing 2 a week. Except when it got quite successful, then they went to 3 a week, which became too much of a good thing, so back to 2 a week. It's hard to say what I thought of originally, but because everything evolved in the making of Peyton Place. And I pretty well had an idea of what would happen in the first 10 episodes, but I didn't really know where we were going. And eventually, we even had to come up with who had killed Mrs. Harrington, I think it was. And this was something that Tim O'Connor had been sent away for. And we got him out. We sprung him because we proved that Mr. Harrington had killed his wife. And it just, complication led to complication. However, there was one very important complication. I had to go and see a woman named Erna Phillips, who's since died. And I had to go with a young man named Doug Kramer, who's become highly successful. And she gave me an idea for continuing Peyton Place. And Doug and I came back from Chicago, and he was all full of enthusiasm for this. And I said, I won't do it. It's ridiculous. And I refused to do it. Well, ABC, Edgar Sherrick, see, I'm remembering things now. Edgar Sherrick went to see Richard Zanuck, and he said, we've got to get rid of Monash. The show is very successful, but he's going to run it down. He's going to destroy it. But they hadn't looked at my contract, and my contract was pay and play. And they had to keep me on. And I don't think anyone was unhappy about that. Except I heard that Sherrick would go and vomit every time he spoke to me.
I heard there was another person involved who came in, a writer. Was it Erna Phillips, who had been doing soap operas like Guiding Light and some other soap operas?
She had been doing them, yes.
Did they bring?
No, she didn't.
Okay.
They did not bring her in.
Oh, okay.
I refused to have anything to do with it.
Okay, because I didn't know if that became a complication.
And it was not only because Erna Phillips' ideas struck me as being profoundly wrong, but she used plastic covers on all her furniture. And plastic covers reminded me of my mother, who would put down newspaper whenever she cleaned the floors. If this makes any sense to you, you're being very clever, but anyway, it makes sense to me. So.
Okay. Well, we had heard that Sherrick had brought her into the mix, and there were some.
He tried to bring.
Okay.
And that's when he went to Richard Zanuck, young Richard. And that's when Zanuck found through a contract that they couldn't fire me. So they kept me.
So you were there for the whole run of the series?
Yes.
The series was groundbreaking. Did you see it that way at the time? Because it was multiple episodes per week, and B, it was basically a nighttime soap?
I saw it as groundbreaking, yes. I saw the concept of a nighttime soap would be groundbreaking. I didn't think we could do 2 episodes a week, but we worked out a system. We had 2 directors, Walter Doniger, Ted Post. Then when we went to 3 a week, we had to get in certain other directors. It turned out to be, after a shakedown period, it turned out to be quite simple. But this depended upon my working out a new system. I started with 3 writers, and And then I had a sort of super writer involved who, we won't talk about him because he's died. He's dead now. And in a short time, we'd worked out the system whereby we had a story group and then about 4 or 5 writers, and that was it.
Did you conceive of it as a soap opera at night, a multiple episode? I mean, as opposed to just a.
I think I did.
And
I'm sure I could have an argument with that.
You said you looked to the film more than the novel. Did you have any interaction at all with the author of the original novel, Grace Metellus?
No, I did not. But I had some interaction with, not with Jerry Wald, but his widow, and just mild interaction. And actually, it became ours. So,
what was the difference, if any, between the daytime serials, the soap operas, and Peyton Place running at night? Were there differences?
Well, I didn't watch any daytime, so I was not devoted to them. So I figured I was doing something new, and it may have been new. I know that since then, or in the meantime, the daytime shows have evolved, and also, we had a couple of very successful nighttime shows following this. So I looked upon Peyton Place, as I do everything, as a step I was taking.
Well, at the time, it was thought that the subject matter was quite controversial.
I didn't think so, but I suppose we had it gave the impression of being more controversial than it was. But
how do you mean that?
Well, Allison was a virgin. We had Betty Parker, I think, or Palmer in there. She was not a virgin. We had everything was built on sex. But most of the sex was not sex. It was just pseudo-sex. And never, of course, do we show anything of a woman and a man in bed together. And yet, it was considered sexy because Peyton Place, the novel, was considered sexy. And if you read the novel now, you'll laugh at it. And I can only remember one thing in the novel where she wrote that someone had iron-hard nipples.
So on television, it was only implied or talked about?
It was implied, talked about. But everyone was expecting the worst because the implications were left us so vulnerable in a way.
In terms of the production itself, how it was directed, how it looked, you said you really didn't pay attention to daytime soaps, so did you take any cues from anything in terms of, daytime soaps have a pattern of how they go to that tight shot and...
No, I didn't. Both Walter Donegar and Ted Post each had individual ways of shooting. And Walter Donegar was someone who would plot everything carefully, Ted Post would almost wing it, and yet you couldn't tell the difference. So,
Was when you originally approached the pilot, did you conceive of it as a continuation of the story from the novel to the film, or just sort of starting over again from the beginning?
Starting over again. And then when we redid the pilot, we went further away.
You said you really went after Mia Farrow to cast her as the perfect Allison McKenzie.
Yes.
Were there other actors you had in mind when you first thought
For Allison McKenzie, or?
No, for any of the other actor characters.
Well, Dorothy Malone was a given. She was in there. The others, I would just meet them and have that feeling about them. I had a feeling about Tim O'Connor. I had a feeling about Ed Nelson. I had a feeling everyone. It was a perfect cast for me.
Speaking of that, how did the cast get along on the set?
Oh, they got along well enough. Well enough.
As the show became a hit, which happened fairly quickly.
Yes.
In that sort of situation, normally, they always say that stars don't create television, television creates stars, and except for Dorothy Malone, who is well known.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that became something that had to be worked around, or a challenge that when some cast members had to be more
the first trace was with Mia Farrow. And Mia Farrow had, during the second year of the shooting, wandered on to Frank Sinatra's thing. And then Frank began to use all his muscle to get her out of the show. And she was finally at the end of the second year, we let her out but we had to find another Allison. Except she wasn't Allison. She was a strange, otherworldly girl named Lee Taylor Young. And went very well.
What was the reaction initially when it first hit the air from the networks, from the audience? I think we know that.
Yeah.
From the critics and from the advertisers.
Oh. Well, networks would be following the dollar, so there was the dollar. The advertisers would be following the dollar. The critics, I don't remember what they said or what they did or anything of that sort, but they were unimportant. And
The audience.
The audience, of course. We were 1, 2, and 3 in the in Nielsen ratings.
But was there a reluctance at the beginning because of the subject matter for maybe advertisers to jump on board until they saw it was a success? Or do you know?
I don't remember. They might have been. I don't know.
Was there any fear of overexposure because of the multiple episodes per week?
Certainly was a fear on my part. I think when it got that successful and they went to 3 a week, I think this was kind of greed. And it became a surfeit, so we went back to 2 a week. Incidentally, doing 3 a week proved no more difficult than doing 2 a week. So, the quality didn't suffer. It was just that the audience had to be home 3 times a week instead of twice a week.
These were half-hour episodes.
Half-hour films, yes.
Filmed episodes?
Filmed, yes. The first year was filmed in black and white. After that, we went to color.
The original conception, did that include that there would not be reruns, that it would run just like a soap opera does continuously?
Yes. That was it.
Was there resistance to that in terms of just production or costs or anything from the studios? Networks?
No, it was not particularly expensive or anything of that sort. We didn't go over budget, and everyone was happy until I decided to destroy the show, which I did in the 5th year.
And how did that come about?
I introduced a Negro family, and in the family, which was quite decent, was one boy who was all his mind had been crippled by Martin Luther King and so on. And I think also any show like that will eventually begin to wear on an audience. But I deliberately decided I was going to try something. And if it didn't work, it would be just as good with me.
Were you tired of the show?
Of course.
You mentioned that how you rotated directors. What about the rest of the production process in terms of, the fact that you had 2 and then sometimes 3 episodes a week? Did you have teams who then sort of like passed the baton, or worked on, like, was there like a
we had one?
team
We would have
Tuesday?
one producer, and I think we had 2 editors. The rest of it was normal.
But in a way, was it like running 2 shows at once? And there was a Tuesday show and a Thursday show. And
That's
each had its
probably
own
it.
assignment?
Probably was a Tuesday and a Thursday. Yes. What? That didn't create any problems for us. But some of the writers had their moments of fame.
I'm just going to mention some names of cast members.
Yes.
And have you react to them. You can say one word.
1, 2, 3.
sentence,
Okay, let's
anything you
have
want.
them.
You can say pass, anything you want. I'll just say some names.
All right.
Okay. Dorothy Mullen.
She was adequate. She was more than adequate. But I can't say she did anything that surprised me.
At the time, was she the real name star, though?
She was a name, may have been fading a bit, but she still carried a certain amount of reputation from, I think it was Reap the Wild Wind or something like that.
Why was she temporarily replaced?
She got ill, I think. Don't remember exactly.
You talk about her son, but Mia Farrow.
Mia Farrow was a find. She was a treasure. But we couldn't hold on to her. At one point, I came in the morning and everyone was white-faced. And I said, "What's happened?" He said, "Mia Farrow has cut her hair." So that led to a little, got some more episodes. Why did Mia do her hair, and so on. It's no problem.
So no, you got mileage out of it rather than
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why did Sinatra want her off the show?
Because he wanted her with him.
It wasn't like he wanted her to be in features. He just
No, he didn't. He wanted her. She when he married her, he also gave her a fiat, I understand, saying you're not going to work anymore. And that didn't last very long.
Ed Nelson.
Ed Nelson was he was very authentic and a really good guy.
Ryan O'Neal.
Ryan O'Neal, outside of the fact that he offered to fight me more than once, he was good. He was excellent.
And as I say these names, you can, if you want to talk about any of the casting process or
Right.
the contribution to the show,
Okay.
Anything personal or professional, completely up to you.
Well, Ryan had been in one series, Empire something or other, and it seemed to be taking a risk. But I when I met him, I just felt he was right, and I think after 4 years he left the show.
Christopher Connolly.
Christopher Connolly had a authenticity to him. You believed him.
Barbara Perkins.
Barbara Perkins was Barbara Perkins. She was a sexy little bit. And unfortunately, she got mixed up with a couple of things which inhibited her career.
A couple of things you can talk about or not?
No, if you read the Inquirer from that time, you'll know what it was.
Casey Rogers.
She was all right, I don't really have a good recollection of her.
Patricia Morrow.
She was good. She played. She was in the same league and really in the same category as Christopher Connolly.
Paul Langston.
He was Harrington. Yeah. He was Harrington. He was very good.
Yeah. And then I think 2 actors played.
Because one died.
George. Okay, let's see. George McCready and then Wilford Hyde Smith.
Yes, McCready died, and we got Wilford Hyde Smith, and there was not that much difference between them, and the audience didn't object.
Ruby Dee.
Ruby Dee played. She was very good. She had. She was good.
Lee Grant.
Always good.
Ruth Warwick.
Who?
Ruth Warwick.
Ah. Oh,
Who's been
yes,
so famous all my
yes. She had a fallen star quality.
And I guess David Canary, who went on to.
David Canary, I thought was going to be a big star. And apparently he became part of a daytime series. Now he's in a nighttime show. He doesn't look very different from what he did then.
I know he did Bonanza, and he was big on All My Children, playing these 2 characters. Let's change. We're going to change tape. Okay.
We are?
Yes.
Again?